Bro, if you wasn't there to play these games for yourself, you won't understand what I mean when I tell you the WWE games from like the early 2000s all the way up to like maybe mid 2010s were some of the best gaming years of my fucking life. Damn near every release was a banger. The best way for me to describe these games was like, imagine the Call of Duty between 2007 to 2012, but in like WWE form. That's the best way for me to describe that shit. Yes, I'm aware some of the SmackDown vs. Raw games had its flaws, but I don't give a fuck. I love them. Now, no matter how much I fuck with the SmackDown vs. Raw games, that's not what this video is about. Instead, we're going to take a look at the 2K series, specifically WWE 2K14. Now, 2K14 is funny because by the time 14 came out, the SmackDown vs. Raw series was basically done. 2011 was the last in the series, then they changed it to WWE 12, and after that it was 13. And even though THQ was still responsible for 12 and 13, and they basically paved the way for 2K14 with the release of 13 and 12, THQ companies had absolutely nothing to do with 2K14. So despite being, 2 to 3 games away from the SmackDown vs. Raw series, this is technically the beginning of the 2K series. And what an introduction it was. Like, this game was amazing the year it came out. And I'm basically going to explain to y'all why I think it's the best in the series, the 2K series. WWE 2K14 is a professional wrestling video game released through 2K Studios on October of 2013. And just like its predecessors, it's basically an extended third-person fighting game that features all your favorite WWE superstars from the year was released. Now, the thing about WWE games, especially games during that time, is they had their own funny ways of adding their own story to it, like their own little campaign mode. SmackDown vs. Raw 2009 introduced the Road to WrestleMania, which they use in 3 or 4 games later. And WWE 13 had the Attitude Era mode, which basically allowed you to relive the moments of the WWE's most infamous era, the Attitude Era. Now, 2014 decided to take that format of WWE 13's Attitude Era and they turned it into their own, and they labeled it 30 Years of WrestleMania. 30 Years of WrestleMania retells, 30 Years of WrestleMania in the form of 5 chapters. The first being the Hulkamania Runs Wild chapter, which is basically Hulk Hogan in his showcase of his first WrestleMania matches throughout the beginning stages of WrestleMania in general. Now, the funny part about this one is not every single match is centered around Hulk Hogan. You do play as people like Bret Hart or Yokozuna. Like, you play as other people, but the majority of the chapter is told through Hulk Hogan's perspective. Like his match with Andre the Giant, his match with Macho Man Randy Savage, and some of the matches in this one does lead up to a match with Hulk Hogan. Like the match between Macho Man Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat. That match, as fun as it was kind of used to tell you what started their WrestleMania match between Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage, and basically give you an insight on everything that happened in between it. So yeah, the majority of the chapter is still Hulk Hogan. The next chapter is the New Generation, which isn't exactly focused on anyone specific. Like, there's a variety of wrestlers you play as in this chapter. Like, there's Razor Ramon, there's Yokozuna again, there's the Undertaker. But I will say this one, and due to him being on the cover, is kind of sort of centered around Bret Hart because he's in more of the matches in this chapter compared to all the other wrestlers. But still, there's variety in this one compared to the first one. Then you have the Attitude Era, where unlike 13, rather than telling you every single event that happened throughout that time, they just give you a couple of WrestleManias that happened within the Attitude Era through the form of 4 or 5 matches. And it's basically the same thing with all the other chapters. You have the Ruthless Aggression chapters, which is my personal favorite, and you also have the Universe Era chapter. 30 Years of WrestleMania, all broken down in 5 parts. Y'all get the gist. Now, me as a person who loved 13's Attitude Era, I was kind of curious on where 14 was gonna go, and I'm glad that they took this route, because I remember during that year, the whole idea of WrestleMania 30, it was drilled heavy. I remember mad promos, and it's no surprise that the game basically took the same route. And it's also kind of fun because not only do I get to relive moments through the Ruthless Aggression era, but I also get to see moments in WrestleMania history that I wasn't really around to see, like the Hulkamania parts, the parts in the 80s and 90s, basically the New Generation era and the Attitude Era. It was kind of fun playing through segments that I used to hear stories of when I was a kid. Then the whole complete the WrestleMania moments throughout these matches, it really helped add on to it. Because unlike, let's say, the comeback ability where basically you have to match the button prompts with whatever pops up, this one isn't just matching the button prompts. You're actually reliving an important moment in that match that has been remembered for what, over 20-30 years. And you think it would be hard because these matches came out in like what, the 80s and early 90s, and some of the people who were part of these matches, they're not around to really apply their voice or whatever, so you would kind of think like, how are they going to pull that off? But in the game, I think even without the voices, they did it perfectly, whether it's the facial expressions, the mannerisms, including real life segments slash promos that came out during that time, and putting them either in between or after each match. Each match, each WrestleMania moment in each chapter really embodies the hype, the excitement, and the glory of these historical moments in WWE history. And now to the best part of 30 years of WrestleMania. The Undertaker. Now, they included a part in 30 years of WrestleMania where you have the option to either play as The Undertaker and defend the streak, or pick one of the characters from the roster and defeat the streak. Now, me, I've been doing this for years, okay? The old SmackDown vs. Raw games, I would pick like one of my favorite characters, and I'd go up against Undertaker at whatever WrestleMania was at the time, and I'd pretend that I was defeating the streaks, right? So, I used to think, okay, well, now that this option is a thing in 2K14, how different can it be? Bro, if you pick the defeat the streak option, especially if you're playing on Legend, you really feel like you're playing a boss battle. Like, the defeat the streak option in 30 years of WrestleMania really embodies the supernatural and superhuman aura the Undertaker has placed throughout the actual WWE events that we see him in. Like, as a kid, I really thought the Undertaker was this demigod that just could not be defeated at WrestleMania, who could barely be defeated, period, and they do that perfectly in this game. It takes a lot longer for him to take damage than it does for you. Like, there have been times where I would get his head and his body to yellow, but by the time that happens, my shit's already fucked up. My head's red, my body's orange, my arms is like, bro does mad damage, and I love it. He reverses the majority of your attacks, so you really gotta catch him by surprise. And to make matters better, it's always a no disqualification match, like automatically. You can't change the match type. The only way for you to fight him is either at the WrestleMania 30, which is the WrestleMania out at the time, or you can pick one of the WrestleManias you've unlocked throughout 30 years of WrestleMania. And I think my favorite part of the defeat the streak option is right when you think you get him. Like, let's say you hit him with your finisher and you about to pin him. Right when you think you got him, the screen goes black, like the lights go out, you looking around for him, he disappears and he teleports right behind you, and then he hits you with the tombstone pile driver. I'm telling you, they really captured that whole supernatural aspect of him perfectly. And it kind of works the same with the defender streak option. Like, even with the characters that you fight against, they kind of amp up their abilities too, so it also feels like you're playing a boss battle. But I think the defeat the streak option is better. Moral of the story, 30 years of WrestleMania was great. Now you're finna get into the gameplay. So I think the gameplay for 2K14 is actually the same as 13's, but a lot more fast paced. Now, unlike the newest 2K games, there's no combos, alright? You can't press X square 3 times in circle and you have your own little moveset. No, it's the main attacks is square if you're playing PlayStation, and X is for grapples. Circle is to Irish whip your opponents like it normally is, and triangle is for your finisher. Something I really like about the gameplay for this one is, as I said in the beginning, how fast paced it is. I think an issue I've always kind of had with like some of the older WWE games, not saying that I hated them, but I always wish they kind of amped up the fighting system for, like, let's say the SmackDown vs. Raw games, like the later SmackDown vs. Raw games in WWE 12. Kind of like how they did with SmackDown Here Comes the Pain. The fighting system in that one was great. It was very fast paced and destructive, and I think that WWE 2K14 took that system and put it in its own little 2K version. The fighting style is less realistic and more arcadey, and like I said, 13 kind of introduced that, but I think 14 took it a next step further. And when I say 13 introduced it, I mean it kind of brought back the whole fast-paced fighting system from like SmackDown Here Comes the Pain or Shut Your Mouth, and kind of the first SmackDown vs. Raw game. Now, just like your typical WWE games, it also has all your favorite game modes like Extreme Rules, Hell in a Cell, Steel Cage, and my personal favorite, the Inferno matches. Now, Inferno matches in 2K14, in my opinion, they're fun, but I kind of wish they kept the Inferno style of the SmackDown vs. Raw games. Because in SmackDown vs. Raw, whenever you had an Inferno match, you'd beat up your opponent, you get it to 500 degrees, and you drag your opponent and you toss him over the ropes. And this one is different, and kind of like in 13, instead of dragging your opponent and throwing him over the ropes, you have to knock down your opponent and kind of like slide them across the mat. It doesn't really make too much of a difference because either way they're getting burned, but I miss the old SmackDown vs. Raw style where you drag your opponent and you just toss the motherfucker across the ropes. That makes more sense to me. The Flames, in my opinion, were a lot better in those ones too, but at the same time, it's still an Inferno match, and I think they did a really good job with it. I think my second favorite is the I Quit matches. Now, just like you know how you see in the TV show, the I Quit matches, you beat up your opponent so bad that you make him say I quit. Now, unlike, you know, the last man standing matches of the previous games where you just tap random buttons in order to get back up, in this one, it's all about the meter system. Kind of like the pin system where you match the green bar with the red bar and you stop it inside to kick out. They do the same thing with the I Quit matches in the last man standing. There's a red bar that you have to match, but the white lines keep going back and forth rapidly, but you have to hit it directly within that red line. And the more damage you do to your opponent, the smaller the red line gets, which I think is a lot more clever for the I Quit matches and the last man standing matches than previous games. This next point might be kind of small, but it matters to me. The championship belts in this one look crisp. And yeah, I know it's kind of because of the updated graphics, which look amazing in my opinion, but I don't really give a fuck. Them belts look great. And my pet peeves from some of the other games, like let's say SmackDown vs. Raw 2008 or whatever, I love the belts, but some of them kind of look like cartoony or fake. And I get it, there's a graphics difference between 2007 and 2013, but still, I've noticed it and I like it. And it's that mixed with the roster. Now, the amount of characters you play as always depend on the superstars who are there currently at the time. And the superstars who were there back in 2013 were perfect. Like in this game, you got Randy Orton, The Miz, Christian, you know, people who were there before, but WWE 2K14 was also the introduction of some of the newer characters in WWE at the time, like The Shield, Damien Sandow. I think this is also the first one to introduce 3MB, even though they were there before, but this is the first game that actually features them as a team. And you also had, you know, characters like Fandango as DLC, but I didn't buy the DLC, so I didn't get to play as him, but if you did, hey, good for you. And the entrances for these characters were spot on. Like, I think out of all of them, I think the Shield had the best one, like coming outside from the crowd and then pouring into the arena. Like the way that they do in the real life show at the time, it was exactly the same. You had the Miz's intro with the Haters Love Me t-shirt and the awesome bubble letters at the front. You had Daniel Bryan, who early on was doing the whole no thing when the crowd would chant the yes thing. I don't know if y'all remember that. Bro would really come out here yelling no, having yes on his jacket. It was weird, but they did that too. You can tell the creators of the game actually paid attention to detail when making not only their entrances, but the crowd's reactions. They got everything right for every superstar in this game, and I think that's really impressive. Because with some games, especially like the later 2K games, like maybe 15 or 18 or 20, some of the entrances for some of the characters, they hit and miss. Some of a lot of things for some of the characters hit and miss. But in this one, I feel like they did it better than maybe some installments in other versions. The fact that this one is the earliest example of a 2K game, and I can say that they got shit better than later versions that's supposed to be more advanced and more top notch, is kind of concerning, especially compared to 2K20. That shit was a disaster. And that's just one of the reasons why I think this game is better than other installments. Okay, so my dumbass accidentally confused 2K15 with 17. How I did that, I don't know. Why I did that, I don't know. Just know that I did that. And I'm looking over it now and I'm like, wait a minute. Everything I'm talking about ain't 15. This shit's not matching. It was 17. So everything I say next involving 2K15, just pretend I'm talking about 2K17. The gameplay's gonna show it anyway, so yeah, my bad. Like the sequel to this game, 2K15, I don't know what it was about it, but it was just so slow. The entrances were okay, the fighting style was a lot slower compared to its predecessor, and yeah, they had the characters, but they weren't really fun to play as because, as I said, the gameplay for this game wasn't as fun for 2K14. Everything about it seemed uninteresting. Even the fucking main menu screen seemed uninteresting. There was no enthusiasm in that game. Same thing with 2K20. A lot of the issues I had with 15, it's like they made it worse with 20. It was like after WWE 2K14 was released, that's when they started having those whole hit or miss games with like 15, 16, 17 and on towards like 22. 16 was fun. I don't remember much of 17. 18 was kind of cool, 19 was alright, and 20 was just bad. I don't think it was till they got to like 22 and 23 where they really got their shtick back. That's when I really started enjoying the 2K games again, like full-fledged. The fighting system was fun, the entrances were spot on, but even with those two, I still think 2K14 is better, because something I can't stand in the new 2K games is the fucking reverse system. The reverse system in 2K22 and 23 is mad complicated for no reason. The only button prompt that pops off is triangle, and if you don't get it, you gotta figure out which attack they're gonna do next and match it without actually having the button prompt pop up. 2K14 is simple, it's just RT for everything. And if you don't catch it on time, you're fucked. And you would think them making the RT button, the reverse button for everything, will be kind of, lame and simple, but realistically it's not, because as I said in the beginning, the gameplay for this one is mad fast paced. So there's a chance that RT can pop up and you might not catch it in time. Everything about this game was so much fun. Like when I think of a WWE game in the 2K series that outshine all the others in the series, I think of 14, the very first one in the series. Now, if you want to compare it to the SmackDown vs. Raw games, that's a different conversation, a conversation I plan on having next week. But for now, when it comes to the 2K series, 2K14 is hands down the best, in my opinion. And the hype I get playing it now is the same hype I got when it first came out. Especially the year it represents, 2013. Like, I think that was a really good year for WWE. The Shield was on top of everything. Dolph Ziggler was World Heavyweight Champion. Wade Barrett won the Intercontinental Championship. CM Punk went up against Undertaker at WrestleMania. That shit was legendary. Daniel Bryan and Kane were tag team partners. And Christian that year was amazing. Like, every crowd he came into, every arena, they fucking loved him. And to top it all off, you had a kick-ass game to end it all, like WWE 2K14. And that's all I got for y'all, man. That's the end of the video. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I think this is the first wrestling game I've actually done on this series. That's fucking weird, because that's like, next to Call of Duty, that's like the main shit I used to play coming up, and that's kind of like the main shit I play now. I got mad at them shits in the corner, but yeah, I think next time I might do another WWE 2K game or a SmackDown vs. Raw game, but chances are it'll probably be Here Comes the Pain. I don't know, it's one of the three. And as for this one, I mean, hey, listen, if you don't agree with WWE 2K14 being the best in the series, that's your opinion. Just know that this is my opinion. I believe that 2K14 is the best in the series. Then if you ain't down with that, well, then I got two words for you. Suck it. Thanks for watching Reggie TV.